So good afternoon, and I'm really excited and honoured to welcome you to the first of the series of the Research Unlocked 2026 University of Suffolk online research seminar series. So this is a series that brings together research students, academic staff, as well as members of our community, and offers an open and accessible space to learn, share ideas and build connections. So I'm really excited to welcome you here today and really honoured to be starting off this webinar series. So it's wonderful to have the opportunity to share with you the research that I've been doing. And just go to my presentation. So as you know, I'm Julie Abernethy and I'm a PhD student at the University of Suffolk. You've also got our Beam logo on the screen because I'm a trustee of a Christian charity that supports birth mothers who have had their children removed from their care. Prior to starting my research, I was also a volunteer of the charity. When I started researching with birth mothers, I was a member of staff here at the university as a lecturer, and I did my first study as a member of staff, and then I started my PhD as a member of staff, and then after a year of being part-time lecturer, part-time PhD student, I decided to go full-time with my research so I could concentrate on getting it done. And so I'm going to share some of that with you today. So I'm really excited and happy to have the opportunity to share the research I'm doing and also the mums' voices, because that's what my research is all about. So my research with birth mothers, I've done one study that is completed and I'm in the middle of my second study. So my first study we call the Beam Insights study, and it's about the impact of domestic abuse on child protection proceedings. And the research I'm currently doing is my PhD, which is the support needs of birth mothers who have had their children removed from their care by the legal system. So because this is about the birth mothers and giving them a voice, I'm going to get straight in and share with you their words, shared with you through a very kind team of actors.
I lost my kids, and they weren't being fair. He had previous violence in his ex-girlfriend's relationship. I tried to say I'd do it on my own, but they didn't give me a try. My son got adopted, my oldest daughter stayed with her dad. I say give the mum a chance. Put them in a baby and mother unit, give us a chance and just hear our story, hear our voices. It is difficult going through that, and they don't know what it's like if they haven't been in that situation, that it's a horrible situation. Family was a bit rocky because they thought I'd picked him over my kids, but it weren't the case. I ended it. I told him that you can't do this anymore. I've got to put my daughter first. But it still didn't happen because she was taken into care. Didn't get a chance. I've got learning difficulties as well, so I think they put that against me as well. And hopefully the system will change. You will get a better chance. Parents, you hear that other people do drugs and they get a chance. And us parents, we never do, so hopefully that will get changed. And you hear people, like kids dying, and I think I would never do that to my kid. They make me feel sick in my stomach when I see it.
So they were the words of one of the mums in my study. So I'm going to tell you how I came about getting those words to put together. So the first study I did was the Beam Insights study, and the mum you just heard via an actor was a member of my research team from the Beam research study. So just to set the scene for you, these are figures that I just updated yesterday. Looked after children in England, we are currently at 81,770. And only 3.6% of these children are awaiting adoption. And there is only a statutory requirement to provide support for mothers whose children are being adopted. So out of those nearly 82,000 children, only 2% of the mothers are actually eligible for statutory support. And Featherstone et al. In 2018 said the focus on risk and risk aversion in our English child protection system leads to a system that is not only potentially overzealous, but also punitive and neglectful, often leading to mothers being treated unfairly. Now, in addition to this, Broadhurst and Morgan found in 2020 that of the 72 birth mothers who took part in their study, 87.5% had experienced domestic abuse. So that's just to set the scene for my study. So the impact of domestic abuse on child protection proceedings. We were initially approached as a charity of Beam to undertake this research because they were putting together a book of professionals that worked with mothers who had their children removed, but the voice of the mums wasn't represented in this group. So I undertook this study with the mums at Beam to provide their voices in the study. The objectives of the study were to give mums who have experienced domestic abuse and had their children removed, to give them a voice, and also to understand the impact of domestic abuse on child protection proceedings. So you've already heard Louise tell you in the video that as a result of domestic abuse, she lost her children. 4 mums took part in the study, and they were all recruited within the charity of Beam. And the individual interviews were conducted by teams. The participants all chose their own pseudonyms to protect their identity, and we worked with 3 research questions. So the research questions we worked with were: what was the impact of domestic abuse on you and your care proceedings? How did domestic abuse impact on your efforts to maintain a mothering relationship? And what changes would you like to see to the system in the future? So you've already heard Louise's response to those questions, and you'll hear Courtney's responses later. So initially, I analysed the results using sort of thematic analysis, a fairly standard approach in qualitative research methods. And the things that came out from just talking to the 4 mums of Beam were domestic abuse was actually used against them. They weren't given a chance to be a mother. They experienced extreme pain being separated from their children. They were often treated unfairly and dishonestly, and they were left alone with no support after their children had been removed. So that was a summary of the results from the interview I did with the 4 mums from Beam. So then I subsequently went on to develop these ideas and look at what the needs of birth mothers were. So I developed my PhD study into the support needs of birth mums who have had their children removed by the legal system. So I was interested in finding out the support mums had before their children were removed, the support they had during the process of removal, and then the support they had after their child was removed. So there were sort of 3 phases. So the overview of my research study and my PhD, you have to have a theoretical stance. So Beam is a Christian charity and I'm a Christian, so that's very much my motivation for being involved and for getting involved with birth mums via Beam. So I'm actually using a feminist trauma theology as my theoretical stance. Feminist because we want to hear women's voices. We recognise that they've experienced trauma in their lives in many different ways, but often domestic abuse, and then the additional trauma of having their child removed. And then from a theological point of view, because actually we believe as Christians that God values everybody, God values mothers, and everyone should be heard. And as a Christian, we're asked to sort of speak up for the people who are oppressed. So that's part of my motivation for the study and the theoretical stance that underpins my studies. So I interviewed 14 birth mothers. So they were recruited via the charity Beam and through social media. So an advert went out on Facebook and there was a link to a Microsoft form. Obviously, I needed ethical approval from the university before I could contact any of the mums or advertise for them to be interviewed by me. And initially, I was asking people to fill in a consent form and email it to me. That didn't work very well with technology, so I went for a Microsoft form. So I recruited online, and the interviews were all carried out on Teams as well. So I had 5 research questions. So how do birth mothers perceive their interventions, help or advice they receive prior to removal of their children? What support did do birth mothers receive after their children have been removed? What support would be beneficial to birth mothers after their children are removed? What coping strategies do birth mothers use following the removal of their child? And what support mechanisms are utilised by birth mothers prior to the removal? And are these support networks and resources available to birth mothers after removal? So from reading the literature and in the literature review stage of my PhD, I knew that some birth mums, when they lost their children, also lost their housing, they lost family relationships, they lost income. So not only had they lost their child, there was a whole host of loss that went with that. So the government does talk about early interventions, keeping family together. I wanted to know if that was happening and if it was effective. And then what support did mums receive during the removal process? What support was there for them afterwards? Cox in 2012 said that actually mothers are everybody's client when they have their child with them and nobody's client once their child is removed. So I wanted to explore that and hear mum's perspective on that. And then actually ask mums who have had their children removed, what would have been helpful? What support did you use? And actually, how did you cope without the support or with the support? What worked for you? So the interviews were carried out via Teams. The mums had a choice whether they were interviewed by themselves or with other mums. So there was 4 mums that were interviewed in pairs and the rest were individual interviews. I had my set of research questions nice and neatly approved by the ethics committee. They're the questions I asked, but the mums really wanted to be heard and they shared their stories with me. And they didn't just answer my questions. They told me about their lives, their experiences, and I was very grateful that they entrusted me with this information. And then I wanted to know, actually, when I'm analysing it, how do I stay true to what I've been told? How do I respectfully and honestly put across what's been shared with me by the mums? And I wasn't sure how to do this with the traditional methods of data analysis. And then I came across poetic representation. So I'm part of a feminist theology network, which has got lots of streams on WhatsApp. And I took this question to the group because, as I say, when I did the first study, I looked at themes and I'd identified being left alone, the impact of domestic abuse. But I wanted to focus more on the individual mums and I didn't want their stories to be lost within my analysis. So through the Feminist Theology Network, I was recommended to look at the work of Laurel Richardson. Now, Laurel Richardson was an American professor in sociology, and she started using poems to represent her interviews after she'd suffered a horrific car crash which left her in a coma and she couldn't do numbers anymore, and her processing was different after the accident. And that's when she started in the early 90s doing poetic representations of her interviews. So the benefits of poetic representation are that you allow participants to speak for themselves. You use their own words. And as a researcher doing the analysis, I edit down my participants' words. I keep their words, but I edit them. I might rearrange them a little. I might trim them down. And I make them look like and read like a poem. Now, Laura Richardson talks about you can have long narrative poems that tell stories, or you can have short poems that tell the impact of a particular incident or the emotion of a certain circumstance. So I then, for my PhD, adopted poetic representation for the interviews that I'd done with the mums. And if you want to know more about poetic representation, do have a look at Laura Richardson. There is a link on this PowerPoint to a book chapter that she's written on poetic representation in interviews. So I then went back. The book chapter that I initially wrote the Beam Insight study up for hasn't yet been published. So I really didn't want what the mums had shared with me to be lost. So I then went back to the interviews and did poetic representation. So with my new knowledge from my PhD, I went back to my previous research. I got permission from the ethics committee to approach the mums again. And 2 of the mums came back to me and said, yes, they were happy for me to share the poetic representation with them, and then subsequently share it with you guys to raise the awareness of the issues that mums face. So I won't show you right now because I might lose it, but there's an overview of the research on Beam's website. So as I say, Beam is the Christian charity that facilitates support for birth mums, who I initially worked with and got involved with the birth mothers. So now you know about how I came to doing poetic representation. I have another poem for you from Courtney.
A big impact, because they thought I was failing to protect the kids. But they weren't protecting me. Neither social services never directed me on the right path. To that to say, they didn't signpost me to any domestic abuse services or nothing. It was me looking for sources of information on the internet. I did the Freedom course and I did the Harmony course. My kids are my world, but they just didn't even give me that opportunity, that chance. I did ask for them to help me move away from him, my ex-partner, and they were like, well, 'cause your kids are not in your care, there's nothing we can do. Well, you won't let them come home because of him, so obviously they're not on my care. And I just feel really let down by social services because they just did nothing to support me. Nothing to help the kids to stay with me, and nothing to maintain my relationship with the kids either because of the domestic abuse. My current partner, there's been domestic abuse with him when I threatened to throw them out. They basically were bullying me and saying because he's got special needs, I don't care about him and I'm not considering his needs. But my child's my priority, not him. He's an adult. Do you know what I mean? So they were emotionally blackmailing me in a way. They could have got him an adult social worker with him having special needs, and the baby could have then stayed with me. It's so wrong. I would like changes where social services understand the impact and when they help people maintain links with their children. And I'd like to see them not emotionally blackmailing mothers, and that if they kick their partners out, then they're doing something wrong. If they didn't do that to me, I could have potentially had my youngest child here with me now, and she would have maintained that link with her birth mum. Hang on a minute, 1 minute. You're saying I'm in the wrong if I'm with him. The next minute, you're saying I'm in the wrong if I kick him out. So make your mind up. So they were just playing constant games, and they need to stop that. They need to just tell mothers straight what they wanted them to do. If they want them in that relationship or not. If they want them out in order to keep their children, then they need to be honest with their mums and tell them that. When you're in a relationship like that, it's emotionally draining and you lose your confidence and you don't know who to trust when social services are playing games with you. Half of them just want to take your kids and that's it because they're getting big bonuses at work and it's all money related. There are kids that actually need them there to intervene and they don't. You see all these tragedies on the news. Another kid's died at the hands of the parents or in foster care. They don't have any empathy and they don't sympathise with the parents and they are just, this is what's happening, whether you like it or not, just deal with it. And they sort of leave you there to pick up this broken mess and put yourself back together. And it's so, so wrong. And that's probably why many of these parents turn to drugs and alcohol, because some of them don't know how to put themselves back together. When they are so isolated from the community that they live in, when the family is isolating them. So it's really, really hard. I got isolated from most of my family, my community. And it's hard to get away from people who are causing domestic abuse then because you feel that that person is the only one there for you. So the cycle just carries on.
So thank you everyone for listening to Courtney and Louisa's voices. So there's a lot of issues that have come out of there, and there's issues that I am exploring as part of my PhD now as well. So for my PhD, the poems are longer. The interviews themselves were between half an hour and an hour and a half. So there were a lot of ground covered, and I'm really grateful to the the mums for sharing their experiences with me. So some of the initial findings that I'm exploring for my PhD are the support that was available to the mums before the children were removed, the partner's history of abuse, and the consequences of reporting to the police as an issue I'm exploring, and the consequences of communicating with estranged partners, even if they're no longer in a relationship, they don't meet up in person. Sometimes a phone call can have a very detrimental effect. There should be support in place prior to removal, but not all mums who had their children removed are expecting their children to be removed. There's not always a warning. One mum, who I call Sasha in my study, has said that there was no support before. She didn't know she needed support. There was no support during, and she just had increased scrutiny of her parenting afterwards. So there is the issue of avoiding asking for help, because you don't want to, when mum said, put your head above the parapet. If you ask for help, you are putting yourself under that scrutiny. There was a sense of inevitability that the intention was to adopt their children once they were removed, and that there wasn't a desire to keep the family together. I'm also looking at how other services work together with social services, and actually the perceived power of social services and whether health professionals are listened to. Mental health is a big issue for mums who have had their children removed as well. Sometimes having a mental health diagnosis used against them, or actually as a result of the domestic abuse, they've got mental health challenges, because that has a negative impact on their mental health. And then that is also another thing that prevents them being the mum they would like to be to their children. As we heard from Louise, she has additional needs. She has learning disabilities, and there's other mums who I've talked to who have been neurodivergent and had struggles with parenting related to their neurodivergence, and they didn't receive the support they needed, unfortunately. And then a lack of honesty and openness with dealings with the professionals, as you heard from Courtney in her poem. She felt that they weren't honest with her, and other mums have said actually they were misrepresented and things were said that weren't true in their view. And then after removal, mothers are wanting support, they're struggling to get to support. One mum told me that she was handed a Barnardo's leaflet after she'd lost the care of her child. Another mum said she was left on her own in tears in court at the end of the day, because you're not allowed anyone with you in family courts. They're closed, they're private, to protect everybody involved. But then the mum's got no support, and she was left in tears at the end of the court case and was asked by a caretaker to leave because he needed to lock up. So these mums are very much on their own. They don't always feel they can admit to having children after they've been removed from their care, because they're afraid of other people's responses, being judged, being viewed with suspicion, thinking they must have done something wrong. So how do they cope post-removal? A lot of the mums talked about waiting for that yearly letter they get from their child to hear how they're getting on, or waiting for their child to turn 18 so they can re-establish a relationship with them and answer any questions they have. And some of the mums have talked about feeling suicidal, but actually hanging on in there in the hope that they will get to be reunited with their children in the future. So it's a very, very difficult process, and I'm very grateful for the mums for sharing their experiences with me. I really want to put their stories out there, amplify their voices, and I'm really honoured to be able to share my research findings with you today. So coming back to the chat, has anybody got any comments or any questions? I'm used to being a lecturer, and I like to have more of a dialogue with my teaching. So if anybody wants to speak to me or anything in the chat or come off mute, then please do. I'm really interested to hear your views or answer any questions. So Emma's saying incredibly interesting, and you've learnt a huge amount, something you initially knew very little about. So thank you so much. So it's been great to have the support of the university in doing this, and also the support of the wonderful ladies at Beam.
Tom, how did you manage the vicarious trauma? Did you have any support in place?
I had support from my supervisory team. They were really supportive. I did get referred to the counselling team at the university because my supervisors were concerned about my mental health or my well-being during this. But actually, it is upsetting, and there were lots of times when I was sort of in tears at the end of interviews. But that's why I do it, because I care and because it is sad, and it is something you do have to manage. But actually, because it is so sad and traumatic, that's why we need to do it and get it out there as well. So it's my motivation for getting on and getting it done, for getting it published and getting it out there. But there has been support through my team and through the university. And I'm also part of the university staff prayer group as well, and they're very supportive. So that there is support. But yes, it is upsetting, but that's why I'm doing it. So if I just share my screen again, if it works. So Beam this is our website, a peer-to-peer support group for birth mothers who have children have been adopted, live are in care or live elsewhere. We do have a book out which gives the mums voices as well. And if you would like to see an overview of my research, here it is. So it's not written up it follows the academic format, but it's not written it's a more accessible style. So just so that you know that's there, we've got the abstract, the introduction, there's a little bit more literature there. I gave you the basics in this overview. And then Louisa's poems and Courtney's poems are typed out on the website for you to see as well. So if you want to go back and read them, you will be able to have a copy of the recording as well. So from my discussions and conclusions that are on the website, another theme that came up from the initial study was that mums aren't being given a chance to be mothers because of their past relationships, because of their learning difficulties. Poverty is a really big feature in having your child removed as well. And yeah, these women want to be supported to have a chance to be mothers. And I think we'll all agree that that's best for the whole family, for the child as well. So Courtney talked about feeling alone and being treated badly by social services. And that has been reflected in the literature as well. So Richardson and Brammer 2020 have talked about the unfairness of the system, and that mums do want to be treated with respect and also acknowledged as mothers. Being abandoned by social services and isolated is another theme that has come out. And yeah, it's a huge issue that a lot of people are unaware of. So it's my privilege to be able to raise awareness and hopefully improve things for these mums and then their children. So the quote I spoke about earlier when I was talking, 1 minute they're everybody's clients and next minute they're not. You've got Cox 2012. The reference is there if you want to have a look at that. Okay, so if I come back to you and stop sharing, how are we doing for time? Yeah. So we've got 5 more minutes. Any other questions or any comments? Oh, yes, sorry. Oh. Are there any plans to share this research any further? Yes, absolutely. So I've made a poster of the research from the Beam Insight study and taken it to the Violence Against Women and Girls Research Network conference in Liverpool. I am hoping, and I'm going to be working with the mums with this as well, to have the poems published at some point. So at the moment I'm working on obviously my PhD thesis. I need to get it into the academic format to pass, but I do want to keep on advocating for the mums. So some of the poems from the mums in my PhD study will be, parts of them will be included in the thesis and the write-up, and then obviously the thesis will be shared. Hopefully I'll have more opportunities to talk about my research as well, and then we're looking at opportunities sort of maybe beyond my PhD to actually publish the poems. And some of the mums have expressed an interest in having a book, or getting out there as well. So we are exploring options on how we share the research further. If there's any more questions or comments, thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, please email me if you come up with any questions afterwards, and it'd be great to connect with you. And thank you for showing an interest and listening.